Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for April 23rd of 2024. For today, we do have three main regions that are going to be looking for the risk for severe thunderstorms. However, we are going to be primarily going over the slight risk for northern to northwestern Texas there. We may also dabble in this marginal risk further down to the south in southwestern Texas, as well as this other marginal risk, which we likely will not cover for portions of Michigan, northern Indiana, the Chicago region, as well as southern Wisconsin. Risks for today don't really include all that much of a tornado risk for any locations. For our damaging wind risk, we do have a 15% damaging wind risk for the slight risk region and a 5% damaging wind gust risk for both marginal threat areas, as well as a 15% hail risk for the slight risk region, including the possibility of some massive hailstones. And as far as our other marginal risks, we do have a 5% hail risk, but we shouldn't really see anything too crazy as far as hail in those regions. For tomorrow, we do have a marginal risk that extends across western Texas into Oklahoma there. Risks for tomorrow don't really include that much of a tornado risk, but we do have a 5% damaging wind risk and a 5% hail risk, where we could be watching for the potential of some isolated large hail and the potential for some isolated damaging wind gusts. And then for our day 3 outlook, this is where things really ramp up. Currently, we have an enhanced risk for southern Kansas into western Oklahoma and the Texas Panhandle. This is actually an interesting case because this was a emergency update that the SPC did issued. This was issued midday. Usually it would be issued later on in the afternoon, and it actually does have some really strong wording. The SPC says, and I quote, supports the potential for strong to intense tornadoes if discrete mode can be maintained. So we will definitely watch trends to see how this risk evolves over time, and I definitely will have a forecast on this by the time it rolls around. But this is definitely becoming more of a scary situation for the Central Plains. So if you live in the affected area, definitely make sure you're watching for updates as far as that risk. And then for as far as our day 4 to day 8 outlook, we have multiple days that we are watching. For our day 4 outlook, we do have a fairly broad 15% that extends across Iowa, Missouri, portions of Illinois, Arkansas, northern Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and eastern Nebraska. Same for our day 5 outlook, where we do have a 15% for Kansas, Missouri, western Arkansas, Oklahoma, and northern Texas. For our day 6 outlook, we do have a fairly broad 15% for eastern Texas, eastern Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, northern Louisiana, Illinois, southern Wisconsin, and eastern Iowa there. So we have multiple days that we are currently watching for the potential of some severe thunderstorms, and some of which could definitely be potentially significant. So if you live in these affected areas, definitely make sure you are staying weather alert as far as these risks. Taking a look at our excessive rainfall forecast for today, we don't really have all that much of a risk for flash flooding. For tomorrow, still don't have anything issued for the risk for flash flooding. And then for day 3 outlook, we do have a marginal threat for the Central Plains there, where we could see the potential of some isolated flash flooding. For our winter weather outlooks for today, we aren't really expected to see a whole lot of heavy snowfall in the United States, but we may be able to see some light snowfall and potentially some isolated heavy snowfall for portions of northern Maine there for today. And then for tomorrow, we aren't really expected to see anywhere in the United States that is expected to see the potential of some isolated or any heavy snowfall whatsoever. And then for our day 3 outlook, this is where things ramp up. No lower elevations are expected to see any heavy snowfall, but we could see some isolated heavy snowfall in elevated portions of the Rockies there. Taking a look at our weather model, starting off with our 500 millibars, as well as our surface observations and how those are going to work in conjunction for the risk for severe thunderstorms. For this section, we will go over the multiple risks for severe thunderstorms, but starting off with the slight risk. Currently, we do have a cold front that is pushing out of the north here, and that is triggering a single supercell that is currently ongoing as of right now. It is more so elevated because we won't really have that much of a risk for tornadoes. And speaking of which, I will not be going over our various tornado parameters because we aren't really worried about the risk for tornadoes. Further up to the north here, we do have a surface low with a cold front attached, and this is associated with a pretty strong 500 millibar jet here, and that is supporting the risk for severe thunderstorms across the Michigan region. Our overall risk for severe thunderstorms may be more limited because we don't really have a whole lot of moisture, and it is on the northern end of that 500 millibar jet streak there. So we may have some more limited lift, but we could still see the potential of some isolated severe thunderstorms there. The result of that is because we did have a trough earlier in the week, just a couple days ago, that is currently over here now, but it did clear out a lot of moisture out of the eastern half of the United States, and that is leading to a more limited risk for severe thunderstorms. And then as far as the marginal risk further down to the south, there isn't really going to be a whole lot that's going to trigger it. I'm pretty sure that this is a dry line here, and that may trigger, maybe triggering an isolated supercell there. So for both of these, both this marginal risk and the slight risk region, both of them are going to be single storms. We may be able to see an additional supercell that may fire up along that cold front, but currently there is only one that is ongoing. And then as far as its configuration with the 500 millibar jet, it is mostly out of the way, so it is going to see some more limited forcing, and more limited lift, but our cold front will definitely be able to trigger that. And as far as our 200 millibars, we do have some decent 500 millibar flow across this region, upwards of 30 to 40 miles per hour, which is definitely a little bit more on the lower end to moderate, but as far as our speed share, it will probably come down to our 200 millibars more. Taking a look at our 200 millibars and how that's going to support our hail risk across the slight risk region, the potential for some massive hailstones. As I previously thought, we are going to see a 200 millibar jet that is going to be mostly up to the north here, with our risk for severe thunderstorms going to be just to the south of that. However, we do have some very weak 200 millibar flow that may be able to get upwards of 50 to 60 knots across this region, and that will definitely lead to some more limited speed shear across this region. It will lead to a hail risk. It will most likely at least lead to the potential of some isolated large hail, but I am kind of concerned about the risk for massive hailstones, because we may have a little bit more limited speed shear as a result of the 200 millibar jet, 500 millibar jet being further off to the north. Taking a look at our bulk shear and how that's going to lead to our hail risk across this region, we are expected to see some at least decent bulk shear values across this region, with bulk shear values that could potentially get upwards of 30 to 40 knots, backing the storm. It is definitely a little bit more on the lower end, and it may allow for the potential of some large hail across this region, potentially some massive hailstones, but at minimum, we may be able to see the potential for some scattered large hail. Taking a look at our dew points and how that's going to lead to our instability across this region, we are expected to see some pretty decent moisture across this region. We are expected to see constant warm air advection out of the south, and we are expected to continue to see moisture continue to build across this region very slowly and continuously across the central plains, and that will allow for the setup for severe thunderstorms on our day 3 outlook for Thursday. But as for right now, we do have some decent moisture. It may be a little bit more on the lower end side of things, but it is definitely pretty decent, with dew point values upwards of 60, which may lead to some pretty decent instability depending on our temperatures and our lapse rates. Taking a look at our temperature and how that's going to affect our instability, because the storm is expected to continue into the afternoon hours, so temperatures are going to continue to decrease. But as of right now, we are seeing temperatures as high as the low 90s, as high as 91, which is supporting the potential for some pretty decent instability across this region. We could definitely see some pretty large amounts of instability, especially with our moderate moisture across this region as well. Taking a look at our lapse rates and how that's going to affect our instability as well as our hail risk across this region, we are expected to see some pretty decent instability as a result of some pretty strong lapse rates across this region, with lapse rates that could potentially range anywhere from 9 to the upper and mid 8s, and that will also definitely help with our hail risk quite a lot, as it will allow for our layer for hail development to be much larger and much closer to the ground, and this will also lead to some pretty decent instability across this region. And again, as I previously mentioned, as this cell continues to live on, it is going to get into a colder environment, so lapse rates may decrease overall. We may see less surface instability as a result, but our lapse rates definitely look like they may stay pretty steady in place. Taking a look at our convective inhibition and how that's going to affect our instability as well as our overall risk for severe thunderstorms. As of right now, our cells are currently ongoing in an environment which has no cap, which makes sense because if we had a cap, our storms wouldn't fire at all. But we do have some pretty strong and constant warm air advection out of the south at 700 millibars, which will likely lead to a constant elevated mixed layer being advected out of the south here, which will definitely be pretty inhibiting to our storms, and our storms could definitely choke on that drier air air aloft. So we will have to watch that, see how that affects our storms, but that will definitely lead to some pretty widespread widespread convective inhibition outside of where our storm is. And then as our storm continues to go on and the sun sets, our convective inhibition will rapidly increase, especially with our strong elevated mix layer that's constantly being advected out of the south. That will definitely cut off our risk for severe thunderstorms by the time the sun sets. Taking a look at our most unstable Cape and how that's going to fuel our risk for severe thunderstorms across the slight risk region, we are expected to see some pretty decent instability across this region, with Cape values that could potentially reach upwards of the upper 2000s in a small pocket, maybe reaching the 3000s in a very small pocket there. But we are expected to see Cape values that are probably going to be reaching at least the upper 1000s to the low 2000s, which will definitely fuel the risk for severe thunderstorms, including the potential for some large hail and potentially some massive hail, especially with our lapse rates that we have and our more modest bulk shear. We definitely see the potential for some scattered massive hailstones across this region. But we could also see the potential for damaging wind gusts with this as well. And I will not be going over our surface cape because we are not worried about our tornado risk. Taking a look at our 0 to 3 kilometer instability, we are expected to see basically nothing as far as our 0 to 3 kilometer instability, so we will not really have that much aid at our surface. Taking a look at our damaging wind gust models and how that's going to correlate with our risk for damaging wind gusts. Again, we do have a 15% where we can see the potential of some scattered damaging wind gusts. That's definitely possible if we can get another supercell going, but because we only have one storm that's ongoing for this risk, we are expected to see potentially some strong damaging wind gusts with this, though, that could definitely reach upwards of 30 to 40 miles per hour. Taking a look at our mesoanalysis page and our large hail parameter models, for today we do have a 12% for that slight risk region, as well as with that storm that's currently ongoing, it is right along the border of an 8. So that is definitely pretty indicative of the potential for some scattered severe thunders. Some scattered large hail, potentially some scattered massive hailstones. But because we only have one supercell, it could still develop the potential of some large hail and potentially some massive hailstones as well. Before I end this video, I do want to talk about the GoFundMe that we have set up for Project Gladiator. For those of you that don't know, we are collecting funds to build our very own Tornado Intercept vehicle, and that's the sole purpose of Project Gladiator. We are planning on researching some of the strongest tornadoes to figure out what makes them so powerful. So if you do want to donate to the cause, the link to the GoFundMe is in the description. And there's a whole lot more information about Project Gladiator in the description of the GoFundMe. I am also planning on creating and releasing a video that will act as the channel trailer on the front page of this channel that will go over and explain what Project Gladiator is and what it's for. So if you are interested in that, make sure to watch out for that video. It may be released sometime next week, probably, potentially this week if I'm lucky, and hopefully I'll be able to see you guys out in the field. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. If you live in any of the areas I covered for today, please stay with the alert for the time being. If you notice anything might have been wrong with this forecast or would like to make a suggestion or ask a question, please leave a comment. 3 other channels I highly suggest you check out are JaxonWX, Weather Watcher, and One Nation Weather. The links to those channels will be in the description, and hopefully I'll be able to see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.